Hi everyone, this is National Master Dennis Monokroussos, and this week we're going to look at the 15th place finishing game from the U.S. Chess League's 2007 season in their Game of the Year countdown. Okay, so the players for this week's game are Vinay Bhat, who's playing for the San Francisco Mechanics. Of course, it's not that they actually fix any cars, but rather it's named after the oldest chess club in the United States, the Mechanics Institute. And playing black was John Bartholomew, and he plays for the Dallas Destiny, the team that actually won the league championship this last year. This match was finished in a tie, 2-2, and so Bhat's victory for San Francisco was actually very, very important. So he managed to hold on for the team to equalize the scores. So a very important match. Not sure how important it was for the playoff implications, so I could probably have checked that out. But this was actually this took place pretty early in the season. I think it was the second or third week. So anyway, very interesting game. Certainly, Bhat played what I thought was an important novelty. So for those of you who have checked out the judges' report, I'm one of the judges there. I had made a comment that he played a really very strong novelty. Now, as it turns out, as we'll see when we get there, someone else had beaten him to the punch by about a month or so, but it was a very good move. Maybe he didn't quite follow it up as well as he could have, and Bartholomew pretty well managed to equalize. And we'll see that after that happened, something kind of strange occurred in the game. But that's a ways down the road, so let's go ahead and make some moves to get there. Actually, before we do that, let me throw in my basic plug for my blog here. It's at chessmind.powerblogs.com. I should have very good coverage of the Linares tournament, and also of a tournament I'm going to be playing in next week. So that'll be exciting for me at least. So anyway, check that out if you're so inclined. I think you'll like it. chessmind.powerblogs.com. Okay, so here we go with the game. Bhat has white, Bartholomew has black. E4, D5, E takes D5, Queen D5, Knight C3. So here we have the relatively rare center counter, at least relatively rare in master play. But it does show up from time to time, and there have been some really impressive results by the black side over the years. In fact, Anand played this against Kasparov in their World Championship match back in 1995, and although he lost the game, it wasn't because of the opening. He actually had a decent advantage around move 19, 20, or thereabouts. So it can be dangerous. Now here there are three moves, and I'll say almost nothing about two of them, just to let you know that they exist. One is Queen of D8, and this really isn't very, very good. I think it gives white too much of what he wants. Too much space, development tempi, and so on. Queen D6, though, is actually kind of popular lately, and Sergei Tivyakov is a very strong grandmaster who trots this out on a fairly regular basis. Okay, but in the game, Bartholomew chose the main move, Queen to A5. Okay, D4, and now again, I want to say a little bit about this position, because in amateur play, one very common approach for black is to go for this kind of ultra-aggressive plan of development with Knight F6, Knight C6, Bishop G4, Queen H5, and castles long, with kind of a twofold idea. One is to really gang up on this D4 pawn, and the second is sometimes to play E6, so that pawn goes to E5 sometimes too, Bishop to D6, and then pray for checkmate against White's king when a castle's kingside. So White has to be a little bit careful about how he meets this, but there are very good ways, and this approach by Black really is out of business among serious players. So let me show you how this can try to go for Black. Okay, so if he tries Knight C6, for instance, if he tries to go about it this way, then simply D5 is good for White. So Black should be a little bit more refined in his approach. So Knight F6, and this is actually the main move here. Knight F3, and now if Black plays C6, which is probably the best move, it'll transpose to the game. But let's say he plays Knight C6. Now what he's hoping for is this. Okay, Bishop to C4, Bishop G4. Let's say White plays Bishop to E3. Castle would be kind of similar. Castle's long, castle short. Now Queen to H5. And Black is ready to play, again, as I said, E5, really trying to breathe fire against this D pawn, or to play E6 and then Bishop to D6 with the threat of Bishop takes F3 and Queen H2 mate. So that's the idea, that's the dream. But White can pretty easily thwart this as long as he's aware of it and takes some steps in advance. So first of all here, instead of playing bishop to c4, once black has played knight to c6, maybe white can play d5 here too, but yeah, actually no, d5 is probably no good because the knight to b4 and then bishop to f5 and castles long. So the best move here is just bishop to d2. And already the black queen is a little bit itchy here. It's a little bit constrained, and that's part of the reason why black plays c6 is to allow the queen to drop back on that diagonal. So let's say black continues with the main plan, bishop to g4. Okay, now white plays knight to b5, and black has some problems. The queen's under attack, and he also has to worry about this c7 pawn. And so the only move really is queen to b6. Okay, and now white can continue very aggressively and straightforwardly with c4. The idea is just to play c5 and kick the queen away from the defense of this pawn. So if black tries to play rook to c8 to substitute defenders, well, that's still no good. White wins the queen. c5. The only safe square for the queen is a6, and now white just plays knight takes c7, and bishop takes a6, which just wins. So after c4, black should play bishop f3, and then take on d4. But even here, it doesn't win a pawn because the b7 pawn is hanging. And after probably the best move, queen to e4 check, white just trades queens and plays bishop to e3. And this position should be clearly better for white. So he's got a better pawn structure. He's got the bishop pair in a situation where it's very much to his advantage. So white should be very happy with this. So for reasons like this, variations like this, black, at least in master play, avoids these knight c6 variations. Okay, so Bartholomew played c6 here. As I said, knight f6 first, and then c6 next move is more common, but it just transposes. It doesn't really matter. So knight f3, knight f6, bishop c4. And now here, black has a choice. He can also play bishop to g4, and white will often just kick the bishop with h3 and then g4. But this is just a different line, so we won't bother with that. There's plenty to discuss in this game already. Okay, so bishop to f5, bishop to d2, and the idea is to play knight to d5 and double black's pawns after knight takes f6. So black plays e6, which takes care of that. Now here I was kind of goofing off when I was doing a little test of the equipment here, and I thought of an interesting idea. Unfortunately, it's been played before, but very rarely, and this might be good for a quick win in a blitz game or two. So the cute little idea is to play d5. And this, as we'll see, occurs later in the game in a fairly similar setting. Now, if black plays as if nothing's really happened, just plays c takes d5, well, we'll see the trick. So knight takes d5, discovering the attack on the queen, of course. And if queen to d8, which again has in mind preserving the integrity of black's pawn structure, then knight f6, queen f6, bishop g5, and white just wins, because when the queen moves someplace safe, there's queen to d8 mate. So kind of a cute little cheapo. Again, it's really just good for blitz, but it's a neat little idea. Unfortunately, black can to some extent ruin it, but white's still okay. The best move is queen to c5. So you get out of the way of the discovery and counterattack the bishop on c4. But even so, after d takes c6, white's okay. Black can't take the bishop because c takes b7 would win. So knight takes c6, and the position's roughly equal. So not as much fun as it could have been for white, but this isn't bad. So as a trick in bullet or blitz, might be worth trying, but definitely not best. Okay, the best move is the move that Bhat played, knight to d5, queen d8, takes and takes. Of course, with the d pawn, bishop to g5 just doesn't really do anything anymore. All right, well here white plays a good move, but again, very well known, queen to e2. And the point of this is that, first of all, white would like to castle long. The second point is that he's preparing d5, thanks to the pin on the e pawn. And notice that black can't really play bishop to e7. That closes the line, so d5 would just be a blunder. But now white has bishop to g5, which prevents black from castling. So that part is very successful for white, as is the result if black plays bishop takes c2. So here, white plays d5, just continues to go for blood here. And black has a couple of choices, but neither is really all that appealing. If he tries queen takes b2, white castles, And now the threat to grab on e6 is really serious. So black pretty much has to play c takes d5. But now white checks instead of taking on d5. So this is just to gain a move, to gain time. And now bishop to e3. And black's problem is that this bishop on c2 is lost. There's no way to keep it alive. So rook c8, knight to d4, and in this position white's winning. So that's what happens on queen takes b2. If c takes d5, well, something similar happens. Bishop to b5 check, bishop to c3, so we've got a double attack. We're hitting the queen and the bishop, so queen g6 is the best move. Knight to d4, ganging up on both the bishop and the knight on c6. Black might as well grab the g-pawn, and now after rook to f1, again, white is, if not winning, pretty close to winning, since he's winning pretty serious material, and also black's king may have some danger as well. So this is a very good reason for black not to take the c2 pawn, and since he can't, white's actually in very good shape. Okay, so black plays bishop to g4, which is a good move. White castles, knight to d7, and now d5. Okay. So this looks kind of scary, and white's results in this variation were actually very good when this line started getting popular in the mid-90s. But black at least seemed to be okay, though I think the novelty, or really Sanduliak's novelty that Bhat repeated, may leave black in a little bit of trouble. So maybe there's some interesting action still to be had in this variation for white. Okay, bishop takes f3, g takes f3, cd, bishop to d5. And now here black has a choice between a couple of moves, though maybe one of them isn't so good. But it's very cute, and against a player who's not really well prepared for white, it could work out quite well. All right, so the interesting move here is bishop to a3. So it's a cute little trick. Of course, white can't take the bishop because he gets mated. That, of course, should be avoided. And bishop to c3 is better, but it's not so great either. Black just plays queen takes c3. White can take the bishop now because there's no mate on a1, but still, this is obviously favorable for black. So the right move here for white is c3. And now the point of bishop to a3 is black can castle here. Of course, white doesn't want to take the bishop because it'll destroy his pawn structure. And bishop takes b7 doesn't really make much sense either, I think, because just bishop takes b2 if nothing else, and rook to b8, followed if necessary by knight to c5. And black wins the material back with a great game. So the right move here is just to retreat the bishop to e4, and now bishop to e7, and here h4 is very strong. So this is a bit of analysis from Shirov, improving on what he actually played against Valery Salov in a game from Madrid in 1997. So it's a long analysis, but it's really pretty. So we'll go through this a little bit quickly, but still I think it's worth your seeing. Okay, so white's threat is to play bishop to g5, winning a piece. So black plays h6. What's nice about it is that h6 really doesn't stop the problem. Bishop to g5 anyway. Okay, black has to play h takes g5, again, or he's losing a piece. Now bishop to h7 check. So another nice shot. Of course, black can't take the bishop because h takes g5 discovers check with the rook, and the queen's lost. So king h8 is forced. H takes g5. Queen g5 is best. Queen f4 check is also possible, but it loses too. We won't look at that though. So king to b1, knight f6, bishop c2, discover check, king g8, rook d to g1, queen f4. And now it might look as if black is okay here, but white still has more attacking resources at his disposal. So queen f1 prepares to play queen h3, and so black really needs to kind of clear out of town here. So with g6, he's starting to do that. So that way, on queen h3, actually, what does he do on queen h3? Let me figure this out quickly here. So if queen h3, I guess he can just play knight to h5. Is there anything better? Oh yeah, of course, just king to g7. So kind of silly there. Excuse me for taking a couple of minutes to figure that out. Well, a couple of moments to figure that out. But yeah, that's the basic idea. Everything's covered. So queen g2. And now the threat is, of course, to rip on g6. So now black has to clear some more room. Rook f to d8. And now bishop to c5. So the king can try to escape on the dark squares here, f8, e7, and so on. Even so, it doesn't quite work. So bishop takes f7, queen g7, rook h8. It's not quite mating. Knight to g8, and now rook takes g8 wouldn't be so good. Just bishop to f8. So the best move is queen g8, and now a few more checks. And remarkably, black just can't escape from this this bind that he's in. So queen to e5 is about as good as anything else. And now rook d6, queen c4, and if black plays king to b6, then queen to b3 check is winning. So black might as well return the queen here. And the upshot of all of this is that white has a probably one endgame. The two rooks are quite good, but given that white has a majority on both sides of the board, it's probably going to be enough to win. But it'll still require some technical excellence on his part. So very long analysis. This is actually move 38. And the line started on move 14 with bishop to a3, and h4 with move 17. So very long analysis, but very forcing. And it seems to be right as far as I can tell. Okay, so now that you're all great theoretical experts on what happens if black plays bishop to a3, we should take a look at the main move, which is castling long. And this is what happened in the game. Now, this looks kind of dangerous. I mean, the queen side is a little bit open. I mean, there's the open c-file. The bishop on d5 is on a nice diagonal. But it's not that dangerous. So black has to be careful, but she shouldn't get mated with proper play. Okay, bishop to e4, of course keeping the bishop and keeping it on that good diagonal. So queen e5. So this is a good move. It's known theory still, so there's nothing new about it, but it's a very good idea. So that way the queen can come back to c7, and then the bishop goes to d6, or maybe c5, and black's king is very well covered up, and black finishes his development in a very harmonious way. Okay, bishop c3. It's also a good move, putting the bishop itself on a very good diagonal. Queen c7, king b1, f6. Okay, and now here we have, again, the kind of quasi-novelty, rook h to g1. And while it's a new move and kind of a quiet move, it's actually very good. And the problem for black is that he has a little bit of a difficult time finishing his kingside development. Of course, the bishop on f8 can't move because the g7 pawn would fall. If he plays g6, then the f6 pawn is kind of weak. So that's not so great. If he plays rook to g8, well, bishop takes h7 would happen. So that's kind of a drawback too. So you kind of put all this stuff together. It's a little bit clumsy for black. So I think what he chose was a good move, and it's in fact what happened in both games. Knight c5. White swapped, so that way he keeps his rook on, a couple of reasons. One is that black is misplacing whichever piece recaptures slightly, and the rook is very well placed on g1, so no real rush to move it. King takes d8, bishop to d4, and here the games diverge. So in the stem game, which was played between Sanduliak and Eric Prier, that game went king to c8, trying to get the king back into a more safe location. White played queen to c4, and here black played queen takes h2, a little too greedy. He shouldn't have gone for this little morsel on h2. As we'll see in a few moves, he'll feel a bit remorseful about his decision, as should I about that excruciatingly bad pawn. Okay, white played rook to d1, threatening simply to rip the knight off on c5, queen c7, bishop c5, bishop c5, and now a very good move by white, tactically astute move, b4. And the idea of this is just to take care of any back rank problems. Bishop takes f2, queen e6, king b8, and now rook to d7. So the point of b4 is that if the pawn were back on b2, black would have rook to d8 and rook to d1 mate, but thanks to this pawn on b4, that tactical defense doesn't exist for black any longer. So black tried queen to b6, hoping, I mean it's not a great hope, but kind of hoping that white will play rook takes b7, and in the resulting queen versus rook and bishop ending, maybe black might have some small chances to hold. But Sanduliak played a very nice move, queen to e7, after which black just has to resign. So the b4 pawn is covered, and more importantly, well, I guess equally importantly, I mean, if black had played queen takes b4, he'd be in great shape. He would just be winning. But anyway, he can't, and now black has no defense to the threat of rook takes b7. So Prié resigned. Alright, so going back to our game, with bishop to d4, Bartholomew's move was better. He played bishop to d6. But still, had Bhat played queen to c4 here, I think he would have been in excellent shape. So it looks like he just wins a pawn with fine winning chances after something like knight takes e4, queen swap, and then f takes e4. So the problem for black is, again, this rook on g1. Well, the combination of the rook on g1 and the bishop on d4 is just beautiful. So he's hitting this. A move like rook to g8 is no good because if bishop takes f6 check, exploiting the pin. And of course, even without rook to g8, if the g7 pawn falls, then f6 is bound to fall too. Plus the rook will be very active on the 7th rank. And also, finally, it's not completely unimportant, the a7 pawn is under attack as well. Now here white can't take it because of b6, but there are variations where it could be captured. So between all of these different threats, white is going to win a pawn and should enjoy a pretty comfortable advantage. However, Bhat played bishop takes c5. And while this is strategically not a bad idea, I think it increases black's chances to hold the position considerably. Okay, Bartholomew played bishop takes c5, queen c4, and white still has a lot of pressure. So I mean, black has a lot of points that are just defended or are undefended. So the bishop's under attack, the pawn on b7 is under attack, the e6 pawn is under attack, the g7 pawn is under attack. So putting that all together, it's a tough position for black to hold. But it looks like his best move here is rook to e8. And after this, I think he's, well, I can't say that he's drawing. I mean, that's premature, but certainly has excellent drawing chances in some of the most logical variations. For example, if white tries bishop takes b7, with the idea that if queen takes b7, queen takes c5, black plays rook e7, and then queen takes h2, and he's probably okay. So it's again kind of a strange position, but I think that black is holding here. And if rook to d1 check, then king to e7, and now rook to d8. And with the trade of rooks, that really makes the black king a lot safer. And opposite colored bishops can favor white if he can generate an attack, but it doesn't really look as if that's too likely, especially if the rooks come off the board. So after rook d8, king d8, queen e6, now white's up 2 pawns, but after queen e7, a queen trade is more or less forced. For example, if queen to g8, queen to e8, the back rank mate is still threatened. If white tries queen to d5, well, queen to d7, and white still has to worry about queen to d1 mate. So it looks as if white can't avoid a trade of queens, unless he wants to just accept the perpetual check. And the upshot then is that the resulting ending is just a very easy draw. So we'll look at this version. Takes, bishop e4, b6. And I think what black can do is simply play g5, put his bishop on f4, bring his king to c7, maybe push the a7 pawn to a5, maybe not, but he can probably just sit on this position and draw pretty easily. Okay, so here we go. Queen c4, so I think black should have played rook t8, but instead he played king to c8, and I think white has an edge here, but still, it's not much. Maybe the best move now is to take on e6, and then play rook to d1. Still, after this trade of rooks, the position is fairly drawish, but I think that black's defensive chances are a little bit worse than they were in the other line. So here, white has taken care of the back rank issues. The bishop on e4 is very strong, and black's king is a little bit vulnerable. So I think white has some chances here, but it's still pretty drawish. Okay, in the game, though, we played b4, and now I think black is in excellent shape. So white's won a pawn, his rook is broken through to the 7th rank, but after bishop takes h2, it's really difficult for white to win. I mean, he's got a nice, safe 3-on-2 queenside majority, but with black's h-pawn and the opposite colored bishops, really black should be okay. Okay, so the game continued bishop to c4, bishop e5, takes, king b8, rook f7, f4, rook f5, bishop d6, attacking the pawn, a3, and now h5. And so what's really very helpful for black here is that this pawn, well, it's certainly not going to queen unless white is really, really unbelievably careless. It will tie down one of white's pieces. And the reason why this is important is that it's presumably going to be the bishop. Well, for white to get meaningful attacking chances, as we'll see in the game, this bishop really needs to be on this diagonal. So if the bishop's on this diagonal, and let's say the rook gets f7, there white can cause some genuine trouble. But if the bishop has to stay on h3, it can't get on that diagonal, obviously. And that white pawn on f3 actually is an impediment for him. It's a bit of a weakness because it clogs up the diagonal. So if black had, I think, played just a few normal moves, then he should have been able to hold a draw with a pretty fair degree of comfort, and then Dallas would have won the game. Of course, Dallas would have won, not the game, sorry, but the match. Of course, it didn't matter. They won the league championship anyway, but still, they didn't know that at the time. All right, well, let's continue here. Rook to d5 was played, and here I think black should play king to c7. I think that's a more natural approach. Maybe he was worried about c4. All right, I mean, I guess that's a possibility here. But okay, maybe you can play king c6, b6, rook e8. Yeah, all right, it's a little bit awkward. So I think bishop c7. If I'm not sure if it's best, but it's at least pretty understandable. White played king to b2, and here black basically gave away the game in a single move, unfortunately. If he had played bishop to b6, or really just about anything, he would have been fine. So it would have been almost surely a draw. But instead he played rook to e8. And here, see if you can figure out what's wrong with this move. So you might want to stop the recording, take a quick look, and see if you can solve the problem. All right, the answer is that white has a nice little tactic. Rook takes h5. So it doesn't have to bother with a move like bishop to f7 here. You can just simply capture right away with the point that rook takes e6 is met by rook h8 check. And it's even worse than this really for black, because not only do we get rid of the opposite colored bishops, but white's going to win the pawn on f4, after which he's going to have a majority on both sides of the board. So this position is just simply lost for black. Really, there shouldn't be much chance at all for him to hold the game. So Bartholomew was absolutely correct, after having made his mistake, not to take the bishop on e6, and chose instead to play a5. And this is reasonable. So he takes care of the back rank problem. So now he is threatening to capture on e6, and he's trading a pair of pawns. And that's a good rule of thumb. When you're down material, when you're down, let's say, a pawn, and especially when it's an endgame, trading pawns is, generally speaking, a good idea. Of course, when you're up material, you don't want to trade pawns, but you do want to trade pieces. So that's the standard basic dynamic as far as exchanging in the endgame is concerned. Okay, white played bishop to c4, a takes b4, a takes b4. And now, quite a bit of time goes by before white really executes the basic plan here. So this actually would be a good moment for you to stop the recording. Not because there's a particular tactic you're going to find, but just try to find the right regrouping for white. So what should white do to make progress? So we're not looking for necessarily a full winning plan just yet, but we do want to figure out how white should try to make progress. You know, how should he arrange his pawns and his pieces to improve his position? So again, I think it's worth taking a couple of minutes, try to solve that. It's an excellent exercise in basic endgame technique. And once you've done that, we can proceed. Okay, so here I think is the basic way that white should try to arrange his pieces. The first thing he should do is to take this bishop from c4, where it does nothing, and put it on this diagonal, which we mentioned before. So bring the bishop, let's say, to d5 and to e4, or maybe d3 and e4. Might be a better way, depending on circumstances. And once that's achieved, white has already gained several things. For starters, by doing that, he's exerting pressure against this pawn on b7. Secondly, he's protecting the pawn on f3, which is a pawn that is worth keeping. third, it really kind of clogs things up for this rook on e8, so it can't get in via the e file, and it only has the one target on f2, and even that is something that it might not be able to exploit, as we'll see later on. Okay, so that's the first thing. Secondly, of course, he should get his queenside pawns rolling, and really what he wants to do is, let's say after a move like king to b3, to play c4 and c5. And the right way to advance these pawns is to advance whichever pawn goes up further to a dark square. Because if you advance to a light square, there's the danger that black could blockade. So let's suppose that white's pawns are on b3 and c4. On c4 and b5. So if the pawns are here and here, well, just imagine black plays b6 and bishop to c5. I mean, once that happens, the game might as well be agreed drawn, as long as the f pawn is safe. So let's say the bishop is on c5, the pawn's on b6, and the rook is on f8. That's almost 100% likely to be a draw at that point, unless there are some particular tactical features of the position. So that's how white does not want to advance. He wants to put the pawns on b4 and c5. So we put this here. The bishop goes to e4. And if the rook can go to h7, great. Black might try to kick it off, but that's at least a goal. And then the white king will go to b3 and c4. And finally what white would like to play then is b5 and b6, at which point he would have a winning attack on this pawn on b7. Okay, so that's the plan. White could have achieved it very quickly, but from what I understand, he was actually in very serious time trouble, essentially making all of his moves on his increment. So white wastes a fair amount of time, but he's trying to figure things out and trying to gain time on the clock. So we can be merciful about all the wasted moves that he makes. Honestly, it's just good strategy given the situation on the clock. Okay, now here we can actually think about this for a moment. So could black have grabbed the f2 pawn? Well, the answer is that he could, of course, but he shouldn't. For one thing, it's really not a very important pawn. I mean, he doesn't gain a whole heck of a lot by taking it. But more to the point, there's a tactile problem with the b7 pawn. So rook h7, and now b5. And the threat of b6 is really serious, because bishop takes b6. Rook b7 check doesn't just win the pawn, it wins the bishop. So let's say black plays king to c8, so that way there's no fork. Well, in this case, rook h8 check wins the pawn. Because if black tries to play bishop to d8, then he loses the bishop. Like so. So he'd have to play king to d7, but then the pawn's gone, and with two extra pawns, white should win pretty easily. Black should not be able to execute a blockade on the dark squares there. Okay, so the point of that then is that black should not go grabbing the f pawn. So he correctly plays rook to d7, and now white continues his expansion. Again, taking on f2 is not such a good idea, so black plays rook to d1. And now he brings the rook home. And the reason why white plays bishop to e4 is, again, he wants to play c5. Of course, the bishop is hanging on d5, so bishop to e4, c5. Okay, and now finally, we're almost there. Okay, more pointless moves. And now at last, all right, white has finally achieved his setup, and the threat to play b6 is a big one. It's a really serious one. And so here black has to play b6. Okay, and now white has to come up with a new plan, a new scheme, a new strategy for finishing the job. So again, I think this is an excellent place for you guys to stop the recording and figure out what white ought to do. Okay, so one thing that white can do here is to actually continue with that same plan and exploit a little tactical possibility with rook to h6. And this is in fact what Bhat did. So this is perhaps maybe his best move of the game, especially given the time trouble that he was in. So rook h6 is very good. B takes c5, b6. So now white's making some serious progress. Bishop c6 is also a nice move, really shutting the cage around the black king. And here black plays rook h8. If he tries rook to d6, king b5 is really good. So rook h8, rook f7, bishop d6. And here, white has a concrete forced win. So he doesn't have to worry about anything schematic just yet. He can actually win by force. So the right way to do it, actually, this is another good place for you to try to stop the recording and see if you can figure it out. It's with rook to d7. Okay, now black has a whole bunch of moves that are really bad. We'll kind of plow through them here. But basically, the idea is that what black can't allow is some version of b7 followed by rook to d8 check. I mean, if black allows this, the game is just over. And unfortunately, it's very hard for black to prevent that while saving his bishop. So, for example, if bishop to f8, well, now the back rank is covered, so b7 and rook to d8 wins. If he tries rook to h6, protects the bishop, but again, leaves the back rank underprotected. If he tries rook to d8, again that protects the bishop, but b7 wins the rook and then promotes. If he tries bishop to b8, then he gets mated in one move. So all that's left is bishop to e5, and now white can play like this. King to d5, taking advantage of, again, this bishop's lack of sufficient squares. All right. If he plays bishop to f6, then I believe that, let's see, just trying to see if there's a faster way. Okay, I think just rook to a7 is the best move here. Threatening rook to a8 mate. The black bishop can't get back to b8 because simply king takes e5. And if rook to d8 check, then king e6 will do the job. All right, so bishop f6 doesn't work. If he plays rook to h5, well, once again, okay, actually first king to e4, and now black's in kind of a zugzwang here. Bishop f6, rook to a7, and there's no adequate defense to the back rank problems. Bishop to e5, rook to e7, threatening rook to e8 as well as rook takes e5. Bishop f6, and now we get it. b7, rook e8, and we promote. Okay, so a little bit complicated, and certainly, kind of a tough thing for white to work all the way through in time trouble. So instead he played bishop to b7 check, just makes some more kind of wasted moves to gain time on the clock. And now actually white has made progress. The king on c6 turns out to be very, very good. And actually the bishop on e6. So he did find a good setup here. Unfortunately, he didn't figure out how to win from this position, so he kind of gave up on the plan. But here, white has another nice winning move. Again, good place for you guys to stop the recording and try to figure it out. And the winning move is bishop to d5. So it's kind of funny. We're setting up this battery, and white's idea is just to move the rook away. Well, actually, it's maybe king takes c5 and rook a7, and then rook to a8. Black has a tough time, again, trying to find a move that doesn't ruin something. So if he plays rook takes d5, well, rook takes d5, rook to a7 check, and then king takes rook wins. If he plays bishop to d4, trying to safeguard everybody, the problem is it allows king to c7, attacking the rook and also discovering the bishop on d5. Okay, if black plays rook takes d5 here, then he gets mated in one, rook to b8 or rook to a7. And likewise, even if he plays rook to h8, it doesn't matter. There's still rook to b8 or rook to a7 mate. Okay, so bishop to d4 is no better than rook takes d5. If he tries bishop to d6, now there's a new problem, which is that white can play king to b5, and the bishop on d5 isn't hanging. So rook c8, and then there's this little mating idea. Okay, so finally, there's rook to d6 check, and this doesn't work either. After king takes c5, rook takes d5 check, king takes d5, king takes b7, king e5, and this is just, of course, a one king and pawn ending. So, bishop to d5 would have been a very good move. Instead, he played rook to a7 check, and again, kind of drifts a little bit here. King to b5, and now c4. And here, Bartholomew is actually reminding white that maybe he won't have all day to just figure out a win at his leisure. This pawn is going to go, and it's also a very nice move because if Bhat takes the pawn and then tries to resume his earlier strategy, well, now rook to d6 poses kind of a problem. The idea being that after rook to e7, bishop to d4, this pawn is, well, now it's just lost. I mean, if b7, rook to b6 check, and rook takes b7, we'll win the pawn. So white has to play rook e6 if he wants to keep the pawn, but this ending is just stone cold, dead drawn. No hope at all. So after c4, Bhat played bishop to d7, which is a good move. Bartholomew played c3. And here again, white had a winning idea that he missed. So the best move is actually king to a6. And on c2, rook to b7 check. See, the basic winning mechanism for white is to play rook to b7 check when the black king can't go to c8. So the king has to go to a8, and then bishop to c6. See, this is the basic winning idea. The problem is for white. So let's go back a few moves here. Let's say to a position like the one after black played b6, and we got rook h6 in. Okay, in this position here. All right, so the problem is, okay, if white plays rook to a7 right now, there isn't really a big threat because of rook to a8, bishop to b8. Okay, so this is a great idea for white, but he has to eliminate that defensive idea first. And the way to do it is to force the king to go to a8. All right, and the way you do that is by playing rook to b7 check at a point where black's king can't go to c8. Okay, so that's the big idea. And all of the tactical ideas that we've looked at so far where white had a concrete forced win, they were all based on that idea. Okay, so going back to the game, so c3, king a6, c2, rook b7, king a8, bishop c6, and black is now defenseless against this idea of rook a7, rook a8. All right, but in the game, Bhat played bishop to c6, and once again, this allows the black king to get back to its safe square on c8. So again, white is no longer winning here, or at least not clearly winning. Okay, if he tries this, he wins the pawn, but it's difficult for him to win. I mean, the pawn on b7 is very difficult to advance now, pretty obviously. So the position we've got here, for example, white's better, and white can torture black for a long, long time, but is it winning? That I'm not sure about. So this is not so easy. Okay, so we played bishop to e4. Here black can play, I think, rook to d2 as well as the move that he chose. And again, just to kind of zip through a variation here, where where white's pawn gets to b7, but it's just tough for him to further advance it. Even when he wins the c2 pawn, which he can pretty well do by force, it's just really difficult for him to win. Black will put his bishop on d6, and white's king is going to have a hard time kind of cutting through anywhere. The f4 pawn is safe. How does white win this? Maybe there's a way, but it's certainly not easy. All right, so back to this position after bishop to e4. Black played rook to f8 instead of rook to d2. But here, too, he's still hanging in there. And only here does black finally lose the game. So if he plays king to b8, again, it's hard to see how white's winning. King c6 just doesn't go anywhere at all. And if he plays b7, then bishop to c7, and black is all right. So he'll, again, have this very strong, very solid dark squared blockade. And if you can find a win for white, that would be excellent. And I really look forward to seeing what you come up with in the notes, in the comments to the game. So that would be terrific, but it won't be easy. However, after Bartholomew's move here, king to b7, now, unfortunately for him, this just loses on the spot to the move rook c6. So white played this, and here black resigned. He's just losing the bishop, unfortunately. So it's just a one move blunder. So the point is, after bishop to e7, takes. This wouldn't be any problem if black's king were on b8. It would just be an easy draw. But here king to e6 is check, and white wins. So a really unfortunate finish actually in a way for both players. I mean, Bhat had played a pretty nice game. I mean, his technique was okay. It was a very nice opening. Played the middle game all right. Made an inaccuracy at one point, but by and large, he had played quite well until he achieved the winning position, and he just couldn't figure out that idea with the rook and bishop how to deliver the mate there. And kind of drifted away, and Bartholomew defended really well after his initial blunder, and then he threw it away at the end once again. So a really tough game. I mean, a good hard fight, and just kind of an unfortunate finish there. But an interesting game, a very full battle, and that's really how chess works most of the time. I mean, we all make mistakes. I mean, if you put your games and test them out by Fritz or Ribka, I mean, you'll see. I certainly do, more than I would like to. Just how many errors there are, usually small, but sometimes big ones. And the key is just to keep battling. So a very interesting game, a good hard fight. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week with the number 14 place finisher in the game of the week. The game of the year countdown. So thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.